Hi everyone, this is Idris Patel from MobiCraze, and today we are here to compare the Xiaomi Redmi Note 3 with the 2015 LG flagship, the LG G4. So it might seem an unfair comparison, but it really speaks to the strength of the Xiaomi Redmi Note 3, which we have here in the 3GB RAM, 32GB storage gold variant, so that it can be even mixed, thought of compared with last year's flagship phones. And And most of you are already well familiar with the LG G4. It's a 2015 flagship with a 5.5-inch Quad HD display, a Snapdragon 808 SoC, 3 GB of RAM, 32 GB of storage, a 16 megapixel camera, 3000 milliampere battery, and it has been updated to Android 6.0 Marshmallow with LG's UX 4.0. So, and then right now the pricing for the two phones is as follows. The LG G4 is currently available online with warranty for 35,000 rupees, and the Redmi Note 3 is available via flash sale method from Amazon and Me India for 10,000 for 16 GB storage, 2 GB RAM variant, and 12,000 for the 32 GB storage, 3 GB RAM variant, which we have here. So a vast delta in pricing, but the phones are actually very similar in terms of the overall performance, and also in terms of especially the SoC performance. So as we are going to see, the Xiaomi Redmi Note 3 punches up way high about its weight and actually manages to be better than the LG G4 in a couple of crucial areas. So let's see, beginning by the display, beginning the components by the display. First of all, we have the LG G4 which has a 5.5-inch Quad HD IPS quantum display panel, and as you can see, it's a splendid display with excellent view angles, high brightness, a good sunlight legibility, and although the color calibration is not perfect, it's still very good. And the screen has really high contrast and is basically worth of a flagship phone. You can really see the crispness of the Quad HD resolution on a 5.5 display, which works out to about 538 pixels per inch. The interesting thing though is that the Redmi Note 3, despite being only a 12,000 phone, has a fantastic display, and in some areas it actually manages to be better than the LG G4's display. The Redmi Note 3 has a 5.5-inch 1080p IPS display which has 1920 by 1080 pixels, and which works out to a pixel density of 400 pixels per inch. The Redmi Note 3 also uses IPS technology, but but the panel is so excellent that it creates that painted on glass icons effect, which is not present to such a great extent on the LG G4. Here you can see how much the Redmi Note 3's contrast carries over even in extreme angles. There is basically no luminance degradation and color shifting even in extreme 90-degree angles. The Redmi Note 3 also has excellent display calibration and excellent saturations. The screen is not oversaturated unlike the LG G4, and also has cleaner whites. Here you can see I opened the Play Store on both phones. The LG G4 has a bluish color temperature, while the Redmi Note 3 keeps things close to 6500 kelvins. When it comes to the brightness, the Redmi Note 3 easily wins because of the fact that it has a linear brightness slider, whereas the G4 has a non-linear brightness slider. What does that actually mean? It means that when you keep the LG G4 on low brightness, it really becomes too dim for viewing in indoor conditions. As you can see, I've switched the brightness. I set the brightness down to 24%, and the screen is becoming much dimmer. But the Redmi Note 3 is already at 40%. If you switch it down to something like 20%, it still manages to be much brighter than the LG G4, which is simply a working out of the actual linear progression of the brightness. On the LG G4, at 0% brightness, the phone goes very dim indeed, which is good for which is good for reading in low light. But the Redmi Note 3 is also no slouch in this respect. As you can see, both screens look almost switched off at 0% brightness. The G4 can only manage to be bright after it reaches the 50% brightness threshold, while the Redmi Note 3 keeps the linear progression and delivers in all brightness conditions. The Redmi Note 3 also has a sunlight legibility feature which we have yet to test, but the G4 also has one to counter that in terms of auto brightness being automatically expanded up to 600 nits, which works only in daylight conditions and which works very well indeed. In terms of the resolution, some would say the Full HD resolution is quite a major step down from the Quad HD in the G4, but in reality, except when viewing side by side, you cannot really notice a difference between these phones. In terms of power efficiency, the Redmi Note 3 easily scores a win because of the lesser number of pixels that the GPU has to power. And so overall, we would have to give the display victory towards the Redmi Note 3, even though though the G4 has a better panel on paper. Moving on to the design and build quality, here the Redmi Note 3 is also keeps a strong showing with a full metal aluminum unibody design. It has a sealed 4000 milliamp hour battery, a fingerprint scanner which is not present in the G4, and actually it in totality it looks even more premium than the LG G4, even though it is quite a lot cheaper. The LG G4 fights back with the presence of a removable battery and and a dedicated micro SD card slot. Both phones are dual SIM, but the Redmi Note 3 has a hybrid SIM slot, which means you can either have dual SIM functionality or micro SD. You cannot have dual SIM functionality plus micro SD storage. Moving on to the performance, now it gets really interesting because while the processors are widely different, coming from different generations of processors, the performance is actually very similar. The LG G4 has the Qualcomm Snapdragon 808 chipset with 1.8 GHz with two Cortex A57 cores clocked at 1.8 GHz and four Cortex A53 cores clocked at 1.2 GHz. The GPU is the Adreno 418 GPU, which is a minor step below the Adreno 420 and the Adreno 430, and but the G4 still has excellent gaming performance. The LG chose the Snapdragon 808 because of heating issues present in early batches of the Snapdragon 810 flagship SoC from Qualcomm in 2015. Moving on to the Redmi Note 3's offering, we find that it has a brand new Qualcomm Snapdragon 650 SoC with with two new Cortex A72 cores, which are newer cores than the Cortex A57 clocked at 1.8 GHz, and four Cortex A53 cores clocked at 1.4 GHz. The GPU is the Adreno 510, which is nominally slower than the Adreno 418, but in reality, in GPU performance benchmarks, it posts numbers which are only a few frames per second off the LG G4's off-screen benchmarks. In terms of real-world gaming performance, both phones performed excellently despite quad-HD resolution being present on the G4 because of the simple fact that most games on the Play Store are upscaled from 720p or 1080p resolutions. There are no problems with major 3D games, high-end games in either of these two phones. So overall, when you consider the value for money proposition, the Redmi Note 3 is definitely the leader in terms of CPU performance. But when it comes to real world UI smoothness, the Redmi Note 3, despite having a weaker processor, it's still faster and smoother than the LG G4. Something which can be put down to the better UI optimization done by Xiaomi in MIUI versus the bloatware crammed by LG in UX 4.0 on the G4. While in most cases both phones are very smooth, the Redmi Note 3 has something which the G4 lags, and which is that the Redmi Note 3 has not really stuttered so far in any use case. Even comparing the Play Store on these phones, you can easily see a difference. The G4 stutters while scrolling in the home page of the Play Store and also on individual app items, while the Redmi Note 3 has no problem at all. The Redmi Note 3, in fact, has better real-world performance than the LG G4, despite costing more than, despite being despite being more than half cheaper. Moving on to the next major issue in these phones, in the Redmi Note 3, the camera performance. And here there's really no contest, as the Redmi Note 3 does not even manage to beat the LG G3, and probably does not even manage to beat the LG G2. In simple terms, the Redmi Note 3's camera is not really worth bothering about. It can manage to take decent photos in daylight conditions with HDR enabled, but without HDR enabled, there are severe exposure issues, and in low light, the camera simply falls apart. So so there's nothing to be said about the camera performance of the Redmi Note 3 until and unless Xiaomi sends a major OTA update improving the camera performance in low light conditions. The LG G4, on the other hand, has a phenomenal 16 megapixel camera with laser detection, autofocus, and their 4K video recording and whatnot. The LG G4 had one of the best smartphone cameras in the entire year of 2015, and still manages to be very impressive now, even with newer competitors such as the Galaxy S7 and the LG G5. So in the camera department, the G4 is not just mile ahead, smiles ahead. The last major things to compare in the Redmi Note 3 versus G4 shootout are the software experience and the battery life. As we have already said, the Redmi Note 3 manages to be a bit smoother than the LG G4, even though it has a lower clock processor. Even though the processor is not as and even the processor is not as fast on paper, and even though the Redmi Note 3 is such a cheaper handset, the Redmi Note 3 still has excellent real world user experience, while the G4 lags behind in that regard. In terms of the software experience, the G4 still manages to have Android 6.0 Marshmallow as an OT update, while the Redmi Note 3 currently is running the older Android 5.1 Lollipop with the MIUI 7 overlay. So it's basically a tie in terms of the software experience that you get on these phones. Both phone software have the pros and cons, and it really depends on personal preference on which you tend to prefer. The last major item we are going to inspect today is the battery life. And again, like the camera, this one is a no contest field, but it does not go in favor of the LG G4, it goes in favor of the Xiaomi Redmi Note 3. The LG G4 has a 3000 milliamp hour battery, and it does not. And right now, with the latest Marshmallow OTA, the battery life is basically broken. It cannot even reach 3 hours of screen on time, and we have been witnessing high amount of idle battery drain of claims corroborated by other G4 owners on the internet. So it's something we are waiting for LG to fix in a future OTA for the Marshmallow firmware. But even then, the LG G4 cannot hope to last more than 2 days on standby, and push more than 3 hours, or basically 3.5 hours of screen on time on heavy use. The Redmi Note 3, on the other hand, is a completely different beast in terms of battery life. The Redmi Note 3 has a 4000 mAh battery combined with excellent optimization from Xiaomi, and the combination of the 1080p display rather than a Quad HD1. All this has a very positive effect on battery life, to the extent where you can have where the phone does not drain in idle conditions, and in idle time, and you can expect more than 3 to 4 days of standby with light use. And in terms of heavy usage, you can even expect 7 to 8 hours of screen on time, which is more than double than what the LG G4 offers. So quite a no contest and a huge victory for the Redmi Note 3 in this regard. So overall, the results are quite surprising. We would expect the LG G4 to walk all over the Redmi Note 3, but it's not quite so simple as that. Xiaomi has managed to redefine what a mid-range smartphone experience should mean in 2016. They have broken all records, and the Redmi Note 3 is basically the phone to beat in terms of the 12,000 pricing. The Redmi Note 3 also scores better than the LG G4 in several important metrics such as the display viewing angles, the real world UI performance, the battery life, the presence of a touch based fingerprint scanner, and also the build quality, where it is easily visible that the Redmi Note 3 looks and feels more premium than the plastic LG G4. But it's not all good for the Redmi Note 3, however. The G4 will strike back in terms of the resolution of the display, which is useful in some in text intensive conditions, and also the major victory for the LG G4 here is the camera, where the Redmi Note 3 is hopeless and stands no chance ever of even matching 25% of the G4's camera capabilities. Also, the LG G4 is made by LG, which is a more reliable brand. Software support and hardware servicing is all done better by LG rather than Xiaomi. Although in India, all OEMs suffer the same problem of being very poor in terms of after sales service. So overall, the G4 at its current price of 30, 33, 34, or 35,000 online is not in my humble opinion worth it. It is worth it if you find it at a cheaper price on on sites like eBay, which often import variants to get cheaper prices. For example, this same LG G4 is available in United States and in the Middle East for quite a bit less than the amount it is selling for in India. The Redmi Note 3, on the other hand, is the essence of a value for money smartphone, and although people have been facing a lot of difficulties in terms of stock and the availability. Once the phone becomes readily available without flash sales, our recommendation would be to don't waste any time and just buy it, because the phone is the trendsetter for mid-range smartphones in the first half of 2016. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and this is Idris Patel. As always, thanks for watching.